In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, Madam President, as we informed in our letter last night in response to the Israeli regime's recurring military aggression, particularly its armed attack on 1st April 2024 against Iranian diplomatic premises, a defiance of Article 2 of the Charter of the United Nations, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran carried out a series of military strikes on Israeli military objectives with dozens of missiles and drones. Iran's operation was entirely in the exercise of Iran's inherent right to self-defense as outlined in Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations and recognized by international law. This concluded action was necessary and proportionate. It was precise and only targeted military objectives and carried out carefully to minimize the potential for escalation and prevent civilian harm. Madam President, we thank those members of the Council who condemned the Israeli armed attack against our diplomatic premises in Syria. Regrettably, in this chamber, certain members of the Council, including the US, UK, and France, has chosen once again to turn a blind eye to reality and overlook the root causes contributing to the current situation. In hypocritical behavior, these three countries falsely blamed and accused Iran without considering their own failures to uphold their international commitment to peace and security in the region. They made unsuccessful attempts to use lies, manipulate the narrative, spread disinformation, and engage in a destructive blame game. All the while, they deliberately disregarded Iran's inherent right to respond to the violation of a fundamental principle of international law, the inviolability of diplomatic representative and premises. Moreover, they ignored the underlying root causes of the current situation in the region. For over 6 months now, these countries, especially the United States, have shielded Israel from any responsibility for the Gaza massacre, while they have denied Iran's inherent right to self-defense against the Israeli armed attack on our diplomatic premises. At the same time, they shamefully justified the Israeli massacre and genocide against the defenseless Palestinian people under the pretext of self-defense. They made cynical attempt to justify and cover up the atrocities of the Israeli regime against the people of Palestine by arbitrary and misleading interpretation of self-defense. Madam President, following the Israeli regime cowardly terrorist and armed attack against our diplomatic premises in Damascus, the Syrian Arab Republic, on the 1st of April, we notified the UN Security Council and Secretary General of such international wrongful act, as well as of Iran's inherent right under international law to respond to such terrorist armed attack. Also, in a phone conversation with the UN Secretary General on 2nd April, Iran Foreign Minister discussed the situation and called for taking appropriate action and a strong condemnation from the international community for this horrific crime. We called upon the Security Council to strongly denounce this unjustified criminal and terrorist act, taking decisive and appropriate measures to bring the perpetrators to justice swiftly and prevent the recurrence of such horrible crime against the diplomatic premises of any member state. Regrettably, the Security Council has failed in its duty to maintain international peace and security. Russia proposed a press statement to denounce this atrocious act, which was backed by China, Algeria, and many members, but was blocked by the US, UK, and France. Faced with such circumstances, the Islamic Republic of Iran had no choice but to exercise its inherent right to self-defense under international law. Madam President, the root cause of the current situation are clear to all. From the start of the Israeli war against Palestinian people in Gaza, more than 34,000 civilians, two-thirds of them children and women, have been killed. All civilian infrastructures have been targeted and destroyed by Israel. Even humanitarian workers have not been immune from the military attacks of this rough regime. The absence of accountability and conscious inaction faced with the Israeli genocide and war crimes against the Palestinian people has only emboldened this regime to continue its violation unchecked. The US and its allies have blocked the Security Council for over 6 months, protecting Israel from accountability for the Gaza massacre. They not only avoid condemning Israel for these atrocities, but also actively try to cover up them. Their sole priority is supporting and defending Israel regardless of the consequences and at all costs. Despite international pressure and UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire, Israel has defied this resolution. Rather, its focus remains on committing more atrocious crimes, showing no regard for international legal obligation. Madam President, this lawless regime has committed many atrocious crimes against our people. This regime blatantly and openly admitted its responsibility for the terrorist and destructive operation committed against Iranian officials, scientists, and civilians, and sabotage against our peaceful nuclear infrastructure in recent years. This Israeli regime even made explicit threats to use nuclear weapons against a sovereign member state of the United Nations. This terrorist regime is responsible for all criminal and terrorist acts committed against Iran and must bear the consequences. The Islamic Republic of Iran has warned time and again about the repercussions of the malicious activities of the regime on regional and international peace and security. Iran has exercised maximum restraint. Now it is time for the occupying regime to bear full responsibility for its consequences. This regime cannot avoid accountability. Madam President, Israel's ongoing destabilized and irresponsible action and atrocities against the nation in the region are a real threat to regional and international peace and security. The Israeli Prime Minister's policy seeks to expand and escalate the conflict in the region to stay in power. The member of the Security Council must not allow such an august body, the Security Council, to be held hostage to the ambitions of such a belligerent regime. It is time for the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility and address the real threat to international peace and security. The Security Council must promptly fulfill its duty under Chapter 7 of the Charter in response to Israeli reckless defiance. It must take urgent and punitive measures to compel this regime to stop its genocide and massacre against the people of Gaza and uphold its obligation, especially fully implement the UN Security Council resolution and legally binding orders of the International Court of Justice. The main and long-standing threat to the peace and security of our region is well known to all, and the attempts to conceal it through disinformation, a smear campaign, or baseless accusation against others are pointless and unfounded. Iran is never seeking to contribute to the spillover of the conflict in the region, nor does it to escalate or spread the tension to the entire region. Contrary to unfounded claims, Iran has no proxy in the region. No individual, group, or country act at the Iran behest. The US and Israeli regime attempt to label the resistance group in the region as the proxies or terrorists. Their sinister aim is only to justify and legalize their malicious and destabilize activities in the region. The resistance group are not proxies or terrorists. They are legitimate and are only fighting against the occupation and aggression of Israel in Gaza and occupied Palestine territories and of the US in the region. International law recognized such legitimate rights against any occupation and aggression. Instead, the US and the UK are fully responsible for all its decades-long aggressions and other crimes and unlawful measures in our region. Furthermore, they are responsible for all crimes of the Israeli regime, as it cannot commit any of such savage crimes in Gaza without the consent, order, and all-out political, financial, and military support of and a collaboration with the United States and the UK. We reject the allegation made by the Israeli regime at this meeting. Such false and unfounded claims don't merit to response. Madam President, as a responsible member of the United Nations, the Islamic Republic of Iran is committed to the purpose and principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, reaffirms once more its commitment to the maintenance of international peace and security. The Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates its consistent position that it does not seek escalation or war in the region, while warning about any further military provocation by the Israeli regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran reaffirms its unwavering determination to defend its people, national security and interest, sovereignty and territorial integrity against any threat or act of aggression, and to respond to any such threat or aggression vigorously and in accordance with international law. The Islamic Republic of Iran will not hesitate to exercise this right when required. Madam President, Excellencies, Iran has no intention of engaging in conflict with the US in the region. We demonstrated our commitment to peace by exercising our restraint about involving the US Army in intercepting Iranian drones and missiles bound for military targets in the occupied Palestinian territories. This underscores our dedication to de-escalating tension and avoiding the expansion of conflict. However, if the US initiate military operation against Iran, its citizen, or its security and interest, Iran will use its inherent right to respond proportionately. I thank you.